Kirk, what's going on? So great to see you and have you on the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. This is super cool. Great to be here with you.
Yeah, we were talking about beards before we got started. I was going to say yours isn't quite as red as mine, but I don't know. Is
No,
there some red hidden in there?
now listen. It sounds like you just said beers, and you're talking about like a red ale right now. No, he said
Both,
beard,
both.
beard, both. Okay, both. Okay, we're talking now on Order of Man podcast about beards
Yes,
and beer. And
yes.
yes, I do. Yes, I do have a little red in my beard, and I see that you do too. Now, I have some Scottish ancestry. Do you? Is that where yours is coming from?
No, I am mostly Irish and German. A lot of
Irish,
Irish, and I
Irish,
do
and
have some French in
Irish
there
and
as well.
German,
Yeah,
Irish and German.
I'll leave
I'm a
the
little Scottish and German. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, bro, we're
We're
kind of
pretty
cut from the same
close.
cloth. I think that's where we're getting
We
these
are.
manly
We
red
are.
beards. All right.
Well, like I
Well,
said, it's good.
everybody, guys, we did joke earlier that we have words for people who don't have beards, and those words are women and children, right? So,
Thank you for
and
pissing
you,
off half of my audience. I really appreciate
hey,
that.
well, Ryan, I want you to piss them off too, because you had mentioned to me that we have a moral obligation. How does that line of thinking go?
Yeah, we have a moral responsibility and obligation to grow these beautiful beards on behalf of two groups of people: the men who can't quite grow it as well as we can, and the men who let their wives tell them they can't.
Oh no, your viewership just went down, bro.
We're just
I'm
pissing
so sorry.
everybody off.
Did we start this wrong? No, I
I
think
think we started it
let's
right because
let's just keep going.
here's the deal: the people that are remaining are the important ones. Those are
There
the
you
people we
go.
want to talk with today. Well, look, man,
Oh man, this is already
you're
so
a
much
bit of an
fun.
anomaly, and this is one thing I wanted to address and lead this discussion off with. You're a bit of an anomaly. I think maybe you don't think that, and of course you have a different view than I do. When it comes to the entertainment industry, you're very outspoken about your Christianity. You're very outspoken about your conservative viewpoints politically, and I think that from my perspective, you just don't see that in the entertainment industry to the degree that you're presenting it. I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, I guess I am an anomaly. I think so. If you think about teenage actors, think of them from the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, whatever, and you sort of see what's happened to them over the course of a couple of decades. Often it's not a pretty story, and I understand why, because I grew up in the Hollywood industry. And number one, the value system there is not one that leads to health and happiness most of the time. And then
Mm.
you add money, which gives you opportunity to go down the most extreme roads of pleasure and convenience. And that often is a train wreck. So for me, I know that I'm kind of an anomaly to be a guy who grew up on Growing Pains as a sitcom back in the 1980s, and marry my on-screen sweetheart, stay married for 31 years, and we have 6 children. And I still am deeply in love with my wife, and I have a faith in God. But I don't credit myself for figuring that stuff out. Some stuff happened to me when I was 17 years old in the middle of Growing Pains that I never wanted, that I never looked for, but it made all the difference, and it sent me in a different direction. So I guess I am an anomaly. I'm kind of the prodigal son of the Hollywood system. I didn't turn out the way I'm supposed to, according to that design. Right? I should sort of be all over the tabloids for having destroyed my life in a few marriages, and
Right.
maybe caught abusing women with and have a coke problem, but I don't. So so I am a bit of an anomaly.
What are, if you don't mind sharing to the degree that you're comfortable, of course, what were some of those things that took place or that where it changed the trajectory of your life when you were young?
Yeah, well, hey, after the beard comments and conversation, what's the point of holding anything back now?
Exactly. It's all on the
Let's
table.
we're just gonna put it all out there on the table. So let's see. When I was 14 years old, I started this TV show called Growing Pains, And this is a sitcom back in the 1980s. And it was when we really only had 3 channels, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And so it was hugely popular. And in fact, Leonardo DiCaprio got his start on Growing Pains. And so did
I've
Brad
seen
Pitt,
some of those
and so
episodes.
did so many others. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can go back and you can see that. And so it was a really popular show. Everybody wanted to be on that show. And when I was 17 years old, I was a professing atheist who I was making more money than my dad. I was going to all the parties in Hollywood, and there really wasn't anything that I didn't have that I wanted. I could just go buy it or get it. And then I met a pretty girl, and I chased her to where I caught up with her, which was at a church with her family. And I heard a message from the preacher that I didn't believe because I'm an atheist. But it got under my skin and caused me to ask some questions, and then begin searching my heart and soul and realizing that, you know what? There are a lot more brilliant people than I am in medicine and science and astrophysics and all sorts of other disciplines that believe stuff I don't believe. And maybe I've got some things to learn. And that led me to ultimately praying and asking, if God is real, if you're there, would you please show me, and would you make me the person that you want me to be? And that led to me going down a different road in my life than a lot of my friends who wound up in jail or committing suicide. My friend on Growing Pains, who played Boner, that was his name, by the way, is his nickname on the show, Boner. From what we understand, he killed himself. Corey Haim, and River Phoenix and others, right? It's like there's this pressure cooker of a life that you live in as a young child actor, and often it wrecks you. And so for me, having faith in God rather than faith in something that doesn't make any sense or explain the world very well, in my view, helped me to avoid the moral meat grinder and sent me on a path that led to being married for 31 years and having 6 kids and a happy, healthy life working on projects that I'm passionate about and are hopefully making a difference.
Yeah. Well, I think they are. And I want to get into some of those things. For most of the men listening, they're probably not going to obviously resonate with the specifics of your story, but I still think there's guys, I'm actually one of them, who was not atheist, but really didn't have a practicing faith until I met my now wife. And so it's very similar.
God's always got a pretty girl in the formula somewhere, doesn't he?
He knows that's how to get us.
If you look for it, if you look for it, you can find it.
That's right. That's right. But I'm wondering, because I know there's a lot of guys who have had similar experiences, and then we as men tend to get tempted and distracted and fall short of our ideals and the things that we want. How did you, especially in the environment that you were in, inoculate yourself against some of the temptations and some of the trappings of success, like I'm sure you were exposed to?
Great question. Great question. We need strong men. Men are being feminized and virtually encouraged to sort of castrate themselves and not speak like men and act like men, and just sort of be softer and more meek and mild. And I love what Jordan Peterson says. He says, men, you need to be dangerous. I mean, become a monster and then learn how to get that under control. Good men are not men who are harmless. Good men are dangerous men who know how to protect and defend and fight for what matters, what counts, what's true, what's right, what's good and noble. Those are the heroes in our stories, in our movies. Those are the heroes of songs and poems. And those are the kinds of men that we want to be. So I would say that, how do you inoculate yourself from the temptations? I don't think you do. I don't think you can. I think temptation comes, and I think that challenges will, moral challenges, physical challenges, any kind of challenge, will either make you stronger or reveal your weakness. and give you an excuse to become weaker. It all depends on what you're made of. So kind of like if you think of the sun melts wax, it also hardens clay. What's the difference? Same sun, it's because those two substances are made of different things.
Right.
And when I have faith in God, the Bible tells me something happens to me. When I recognize my moral depravity and weakness and ability to be led astray by the wicked desires of my own heart, when I embrace that and I don't make excuses for that, and I turn to the one who can overhaul my character and my faith, give me identity and purpose and destiny, he says that something happens. He changes the desires of my heart. I have something called the fear of the Lord. I have the Spirit of God, which is my joy and my strength. And slowly but surely, I begin to win those battles over temptation, which produces character in me. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not what I could be. I'm not what I should be. But Ryan, I'm not what I was. And it's not about perfection. It's about direction. And as long as I'm moving in the right direction and not sliding back and making excuses for myself as I hurt my wife, hurt my kids, and those around me, making excuses as I slide back into immaturity or kindergarten Christianity, then I can say, God, help me to be the man you've created me to be today. I need your strength. Lead me not into temptation. Why? Because I'm weak without you. But deliver me from evil today. Yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory, and I'm here to serve you. That's where my strength comes from. That's where the victory comes from. And you can have it if you recognize who you are and your need for God, and then deny yourself and begin to follow him.
Clearly it sounds like you have a tremendous level of faith in God. How do you, when you're talking about your projects a bit ago, how do you determine what are projects that I would assume you want to be his projects based on what you're saying, and that they're not your projects or the things that are your own, maybe selfish desires?
Great question. If you, I want to answer both of the things you just mentioned. So help me if I forget the second by the time I get to it. The first thing you said,
I've already forgot it, but we'll at some point we'll loop back around to it.
Remind me about how do you pick projects that are, not just my projects, but maybe divinely appointed projects. But first, you said I have really strong faith in God. I have great faith in God. Well, why shouldn't I have great faith in God? Why shouldn't you and me and everyone have great faith in God? By the way, that's not a compliment to me. That's a compliment to God, similar to the faith that you have in your doctor. If I said, Ryan, you've got great faith in your doctor, that's not complimenting you. That's really saying something about the ability of your doctor, that you trust him so much. He must be amazing that you will let him cut open your body and do surgery inside of you. You've got great faith in your doctor. And we should have nothing less than great faith in God when we look at what he's doing. He's keeping our heart beating at night while we're asleep. He's causing the sun the earth to spin on its axis and orbit around the sun to where we can plan the day and the night and this interview right now at this time, and we can count on the seasons and a billion other things that work inside of us. My friend, he just passed away from pancreatic cancer. When's the last time you thought about your bile duct? When's the last time you thought about the ability to produce the hormones and the chemicals necessary for you and I to think and have this conversation? And yet God's making sure that regularly these things are occurring so that we can enjoy life. Now we live in a broken world, and so that's not always the case, but I'm saying that we have reason to have great faith in God because he is faithful. All right, the other thing you had mentioned was how do you pick your projects? Sometimes I do wonder, Ryan, if this is a project that's my idea or whether God's given it to me. And then other times it just seems so obvious, but I don't know it when it's happening. It's usually when I'm looking in the rearview mirror that I recognize that. It's kind of like, being an actor for me in general, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a surgeon. I wanted to be like Ben Carson. I loved biology. I wanted to get into the human body and sort of and make a lot of money and be a doctor. And then something happened to where my mom took me to this agent I interviewed, and all of a sudden I'm an actor. And it's not something I wanted to do, but it appears to me now that God had a plan all along. Same with meeting my wife. I met an actress on a Hollywood set in California, and she lived in Buffalo, New York her whole life. I thought with the chances that I would meet an amazing woman of faith and character in Hollywood, an actress no less, were slim to none. But I look back in the rearview mirror and I go, man, God was kind to me. He was good to me. So when it comes to projects, I'd love an email addressed from heaven saying, hey, Kirk, this is the next movie you ought to do.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Usually what happens is you follow the recipe of have an attitude of gratitude, expect God to open doors for you, pay attention, don't despise the little insignificant things, and make decisions that you think are going to honor God and bless other people. And I think that puts you on the right road. And then you get to sit back and enjoy the way that God begins to fill in all of the blanks. That's at least the way that I view it. And I look in the rearview mirror and say, man, growing pains was one of those things. My wife was one of those things. Being an atheist who comes to faith in Jesus in Hollywood must be one of those things. I certainly wasn't looking for that. And then this new movie, Lifemark, that I'm doing. This was something that I had no intentions of making, but when it got dropped in my lap, I had no choice.
What do you mean you had no choice? Explain that, because clearly you do have a choice.
Okay. So I guess I'm using a bit of hyperbole there, but
I know. I would like to hear it.
What
I think a lot of us would,
Yeah. So I'm as an actor, you're always between jobs, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to be waiting tables here in a week if I don't get another gig. Right? I'm going to be doing DoorDash or Uber if this new movie project.
Somebody would be very surprised if they saw you pull up to deliver their pizza. I gotta say, that might actually be funny.
Although that could be really fun. That could be like DoorDash karaoke. We could have a whole new show that we could do.
That's right. Look at these divinely inspired ideas right on this podcast.
That's right. We're coming up with them right now. Or those could be epic failures.
Yeah, those could be our own selfish pursuits for sure.
Somebody sent me a text and said, hey, watch this little documentary. It's about 20 minutes long and it's based on a true story. So I watched it, and man, I was bawling like a baby. I was ugly face crying in my living room because it was this true story about an 18-year-old girl who changed her mind on the abortion table. She gives birth to her son after hiding the pregnancy for 9 months. And then she places him for adoption. She thinks she'll never see him again. 19 years later, he calls and he wants to meet her. She thinks he probably hates her guts for abandoning him as a baby. And he wants to meet her to say thank you for this great life he's been given and for this family that he has. And I saw this and said, oh my goodness, I've got 6 children and 4 of my kids are adopted. My wife is an adopted child. This is like their story. And I wouldn't have any of them if someone didn't change her mind about abortion. And in fact, not just someone, but 6 people, 6 moms or 5 moms. And I said, this needs to be turned into a movie. So I got the rights to the life story. And then I called my buddies, the Kendrick brothers. Those are the guys that made the movies Fireproof, Courageous, War Room, Facing the Giants, Flywheel. And I said, do you guys think this would make a good movie? Because I'm about to sink a lot of time and money into this. And they said, not only would it make a good movie, we want to make it with you. We think God is urging us to make a movie about this subject. And Ryan, get this movie about the value of life and the beauty of adoption, we started it 2.5 years ago. And we had no idea that when we finished it and got it ready to go out into movie theaters,
The timing,
which is going to be September 9th, is going to be just
right,
2 months after Roe versus Wade is overturned at the Supreme Court.
right,
The timing
right.
couldn't be more perfect. So I look at that and I go, did I plan that? Did I orchestrate and mastermind this thing? I didn't. In fact, the script of the movie is based on what actually happened and the words that came out of their mouths when we interviewed the birth mom and the birth dad and the kids. We couldn't have written the script any better than what we have right now in the movie LifeMark.
When you do a project like LifeMark or anything, you had a homeschooling an event that I think is over now, if I remember right, that took place in July. And then American Campfire Revival. Clearly, it's about more than just entertainment, which is what we think when we see a movie. It's like, oh, I'm going to be entertained. I might be a little inspired. You know, what is your mission when you choose a project like this, like LifeMark? What is it that you want out of it, and how do you know it's a success?
Sometimes I don't look for getting something out of it. Other times I think, yes, I want to inspire or give hope on a particular topic or educate on a topic. So with the Homeschool Awakening, COVID hit. I don't know what you think about COVID, the great pandemic or plandemic or scamdemic or however you want to describe it.
Right, right.
Millions of children were told to stay home, and their parents watched on their computers what these kids were being taught. And millions of parents were horrified at the things that they were being taught. They were being taught to choose their own pronoun. They're being taught to hate our country. They're being taught a completely revised version of American history. And ultimately, these parents and the trust that they put in public schools was being undermined dramatically. And so they yanked their kids and didn't send them back to school. And suddenly we have millions of families who are homeschooling. And we homeschooled our children for a number of years. And there is an amazing awakening taking place across the nation among parents. And I thought we should document this because people are looking for answers. They want something better than critical race theory and genderqueer theory and the 1619 Project for their kids. They recognize that there is a concerted effort out to destroy Western civilization and America specifically, to usher in some authoritarian government. And they don't want their children to be played as pawns in that scheme. And so homeschooling is a world of opportunity for them that provides hope and options that many people just aren't aware of. So I made the Homeschool Awakening, documenting the everyday adventures of 17 American homeschool families who are on a mission to put faith and family back into education. So I was hoping for that to occur in that movie. But then other stuff like the American Campfire Revival was just me being locked in my backyard because I live in California with a governor who put us all under house arrest during the pandemic. And we just sat back and we're watching the first 100 days of the new president's administration. And all of these things begin to roll down from Capitol Hill that were terrible. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what do we do as the family of faith? Do we just sit back and complain and whine and say, oh, the end is near. Let's just hope the rapture gets here, by March? Or do we have our own 100-day plan? How about we get off the defense and get on the offense and start to do things like William Wilberforce did and end slavery? How about we get off the defense and get into the arena and we do stuff and become the Bravehearts and the George Washingtons and the Bonhoeffers of our day, driven by faith with a love for people? So I said, I got a 100-day personal plan. If you want to join me on Facebook, join me. I'm going to make a campfire in my backyard for 100 consecutive nights. And I'm going to obey the executive orders and the mandates from heaven, which are, if my people will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways and seek my face, then I will hear their prayers, forgive their sin, and heal their land. And I'm thinking to myself, that's what we need.
That is what we need.
So how about we just do that? Maybe it'll work for us like it did for the children of Israel thousands of years ago. And so I did that. And tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and then millions of people were joining me in my backyard for a campfire revival meeting. And I taught through a book called The American Covenant. In fact, I'll show it to you. I got it right here. This book right here, The American Covenant. And it basically documents what our founding fathers and our forefathers and foremothers before them, the Pilgrims, understood. And that was that they were in sacred relationship with God, and they applied the heavenly principles found in the scriptures to every aspect of their life, their personal life, their marriage, their home, the works of their hands, their businesses, their spiritual life, and their civil government. And when they did that, they ended up laying out the blueprint for what later became the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, which ultimately allowed free enterprise to flourish, religious freedom, political freedom, resulting in the freest, strongest, most blessed nation in the history of the earth. And these are the kinds of things that happen where I'm not looking to get something out of it. I'm looking to not lose my mind when I see evil crouching in on me and my family. I want to fight back and overcome evil with good.
You know what else is so powerful about what you're saying is when you're talking about hundreds of thousands or even millions of people joining you, I think a lot of the times us as men believe that we can't make a difference, that, you know, we're just one person, or maybe we can impact our family, but we certainly can't extend it out from there. And then here you are talking about these incredible projects that are impacting literally hundreds of thousands of people. I guess what I've seen is so many men not willing to take action because it doesn't meet, or they don't have any hope that it will meet their standard of impact in the world.
Yeah, but that's just not true. I get the feeling, you know, what can one guy do? And I'm not just offering up some platitude that, well, you know, just one guy can take it. But listen, when it's one guy or one woman in partnership with God, you have an unfair advantage over the opposition. That's true. We could take story after story throughout history, but just think of one guy named Patrick, Saint Patrick, 1500 years ago. Here's one guy who at 16 years old was kidnapped in England and sold into sex trafficking and slavery. He was thrown into a boat and taken off to an island that nobody wanted to go to. Not even those in the Roman Empire had anything to do with it, because there were people there who fought in the nude and they chopped the heads off of their enemies. And it was this crazy place called Ireland. And he goes there, and he came from a Christian family. And so while he's praying on a hill, watching sheep, God gives him a vision, and he miraculously escapes this prison that he's in. And you think, wow, the guy just got out, you know, I mean, just barely, against all odds, he survives this. Well, he believes that he has been saved for a purpose, and he gets on mission with 12 of his friends, and he gets a hold of a Bible, and he goes back to the place where he was enslaved, and he confronts the king, converts the king, and he ends up setting up churches and schools and changing the laws of Ireland and liberating an entire nation, who then sends out missionaries to other parts of the world, ultimately leading us to a place where the Reformation happens, and the printing press is created, and the Bible is printed, and the entire world is changed. And you go, what were the chances that that one guy could do something? He was a kid. He was kidnapped and turned into a slave. But him with God is an unfair advantage over the forces of darkness. And you could say that about King Alfred. You could say that about Braveheart. You could say that about William Wilberforce, working to abolish the slave trade. You could say that about Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. It's always against all odds. But John Adams said, it does not take a majority of men to prevail, but rather a committed, irate minority who is set on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. You do that, and there's no telling what'll happen. You inspire more and more will come and join you, and history can be changed.
I think this is a big reason why the powers that be would attempt to undermine two fundamental units of a thriving culture or society. That is the man, and that is the nuclear family. And that's not to dismiss what women, of course, bring to the equation either. But
Hey, without women, we wouldn't be here, and without men, women wouldn't be here. We need each other. But you're right. There is a deconstructing of society by undermining the value of men, undermining the value of women, and undermining the value of children, and undermining the family itself. Each of us has a critical role to play.
So how then does, because what you're talking about, I believe, and I see it even in my own life to a degree, with what we've been able to do. And I love that you look back on projects and you think, well, this was divinely inspired, but you didn't know it at the time. That's very much how I feel about our movement here. I didn't realize that, which I feel now, is that God was literally setting this up through me. I didn't feel that when I was doing it. I certainly feel it now. But all the things you're talking about require an element of courage. And I think it is so sorely lacking in society and culture today. We have been conditioned, we have been sedated, we have been medicated. There is just a lacking of courage in otherwise very capable and goodly men.
That's right. Yeah, man, you're exactly right. There's a guy named Dinesh D'Souza. He makes a lot of documentaries, so you may be very familiar with him. I remember him telling a story once where he talked about a lion who was being controlled by a lion tamer with a whip. This skinny little guy, and you've got the lion who's big and powerful. Now, who is more powerful, the lion or the lion tamer? He asked. Ryan, what's the obvious answer to that question?
Well,
who's more powerful,
lion
the lion or the lion tamer? The lion. Yeah, he can eat them as an appetizer, just in one bite. Sure. However, the lion has been convinced that the lion tamer is in charge. That's why he can get him to do those tricks. Ever since he was a little kid, that little cub was trained to obey the man. If he only understood his power, if he only understood what he was capable of, that lion tamer would run out the door because he doesn't stand a chance. And I believe that men and women of faith who are educated and they have character and they have self-control are like that lion. And if only we would recognize who we are and the power and influence that we have, and throw off the lies that we've been told since we were little kids. And it's even worse for the young boys today who are growing up. I mean, these are our future men. What are they going to be like? I mean, they're being told that they can be a girl if they want to right now, and that maybe they shouldn't really even. There's so much we could go into about this. I know that's not the point of our podcast, but I think the point is we need strong men of faith and character. Faith, because we need the fear of God. If we don't have the fear of God, we tend to want to slide into the position of becoming God ourselves and trying to manipulate our own little mini kingdom and sort of be the sovereign of our own little make-believe universe where we start ordering people around and dominating other people. That destroys stuff. When we have the fear of the Lord and we recognize that we're not the creator of all things, we're creatures. Now that puts us in perspective. And when we have character, that allows us to take truth, mix it with compassion, and actually go out there and change our world for good.
I'm only pausing because I've got a bunch of notes. I take notes because I love what you're saying. One of the concerns I think, or at least factors that I've began to recognize is why are we so sedated? Why are we so passive when we should be more assertive or even aggressive in moments? Why do we see problems but don't really step into them? And one realization I'm coming to is that for a lot of us, it feels like there is so much to lose, right? I think about this story you're telling with the lion and the lion tamer. Now, look, the lion is probably not aware enough to realize that if he leaves, he's going to have a significantly harder time finding food than it being fed to him, on a 9 to 5 type schedule. But we're aware of that. We know if we ruffle feathers, we know if we step out of culture's line, that there are real world consequences to what we might be unlocking.
Yeah, but that's what I'm. That's,
so what?
That's
Right?
what I was
That's
trying
what
to
it
say.
is.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. Is, do you really just? I mean, is that what we want? Do we want to just lay down on our backs and just be passive? I think that's kind of what the Revolutionary War was all about. I think that's what Patrick Henry was talking about. I think that's what Braveheart was talking about. They said, you know what? I would rather die than allow another man to enslave me and to be emasculated and not be able to defend my wife and my kids and work and enjoy the fruit of my labor. This is what God built me for. And I want to be set free in my heart. I don't want to be in bondage to the snakes in my head and the demons in my heart that wrap me up in alcohol or substance abuse or in abusing other people to cope with my pain and shame and guilt. I want to be free from all of that. And not only that, I want to liberate my world. I don't want tyrants out there abusing other people. That's what we're here for. And that's what's led to the great liberating moments of history. These are the heroes in every great movie and every great story. People who trade their freedom, which is tough, which requires personal responsibility and massive risk taking because there's no guarantees. But if you trade that for being spoon-fed on a 9 to 5 schedule and willingly locking yourself into a cage, I think you've missed the point of this great life that God's given you. Because you're not free. And if you're not free, you're in bondage and you're in slavery. And I think that's the great adventure of life, is embracing the risk and getting in partnership with God and going out there to change the world. You might die in the process. Braveheart did. I don't think he regrets it. I don't think he would change the story. Jesus did. They impaled him on a cross, but he wouldn't change the story. God is the best script writer of all. And the hero that you want to be is never the guy in the movie who wusses out and takes a bribe and hides in the corner and just gives into his lower nature rather than sacrificing himself for a higher cause. If that's the guy that you want to be, and that's the kind of guy I want to be, we have to embrace the unknown and the risk, and we need to go for it.
And I think there's also this element of faith that you've been talking about as well, that as you take these risks and you step into these unknowns, doing the right thing is obviously clearly it's the right thing to do, but we also have to remember that there's going to be a path that will be forged when you do the right thing. Like, you're going to suffer. In a lot of ways, there's going to be some decisions you have to make where you will suffer, or your family might suffer. Maybe it's as simple as at work being asked to go against your principles.
Yeah.
And then having to quit. Well, your family's going to suffer. You're going to have a hard time paying the bills for a month or two. But then also having faith that the way will be paved.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. But we got to say to ourselves, if we say like, oh man, I don't want that to happen. No, bro, suffering is inescapable. The problem is if you go down that route so that you don't suffer temporarily by losing your job now, you're going to suffer later worse. Or worse than that, your kids are going to suffer and they're going to look at you and go, Dad, why didn't you be a man at the moment you needed to be a man? Why didn't you stand up for that stuff? Why didn't you think down the road instead of just doing what was convenient at the moment? I'm not saying it's easy. Of course it's not easy. I don't want to be burned at the stake. I don't want to be drawn and quartered. I don't want to be locked in a prison. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want any of that stuff. I want to be hanging out with you on this podcast. I want to, I want to have a nice cup of coffee and enjoy time with my wife. But guess what? If George Washington had said the same thing and he didn't man up, if he didn't, have balls of titanium and do the right thing, trusting in the justice of his cause, depending on the protection of the Almighty, we wouldn't be having this conversation and we wouldn't be enjoying these blessings. And that challenges me. I'm no George Washington, but having heroes like that makes a difference. And I've known men in my own life who have been mentors to me. One of them just died. His name's Marshall Foster. In fact, I just mentioned this book he wrote called The American Covenant, and he details the inspiring stories of men of history. My buddy Marshall just became one of those men. He inspired me. He was a man of courage, a man of faith, and he helped me to remember that we should not be just whining and complaining about the darkness around us, crying in our Chick-fil-A soup, waiting for Jesus to return and rapture us out of here. We need to be liberty men and women of faith and character, conduits that bring heaven to earth. That's the kind of person that I want to be. And I think deep down inside, every man wants to be that.
I agree. I agree with that. Are there times where in your career that you've been passed over or, blacklisted for any of your political viewpoints, perspectives, Christian faith-based perspectives, where it's impacted your professional career?
Yeah, I'm sure there have been. There's parts in films that were very successful that I passed up because, hey, you know what? I told my wife at the altar that I'm going to love and cherish her, forsaking all others. So I'm not going to sleep with this girl in this movie, right? And so, yeah, I missed out on that. Okay, but guess what? I don't know where those actors are in their own personal lives, but I can tell you where I am right now. I just went away on a very romantic weekend getaway with my wife of 31 years, and we're in love. And I'm moving down a road of projects like Lifemark the movie and American Campfire Revival, and other kinds of things that I'm so much more passionate about than about just doing some popular movie that's going to make me a bunch of money. I want a life of meaning and significance. I told you I just went to the funeral of my mentor, one of my best buddies. Man, that's how I want my funeral to be. People were up there and they weren't tears of regret. It wasn't just telling old stories about, my old drinking buddy and our exploits in college. This is about a man who changed my life. This is about a man who didn't make money his priority. He was in control of money that other people wanted to use to advance the kingdom of goodness and light. And he directed a lot of that stuff with wisdom and courage and character. And he inspired us to want to be men that make a difference, to be the William Wilberforces and the Bravehearts of the world. That's what I want to be. I think all men know that we need to be that. Unfortunately, we're listening to messages from people that shouldn't matter to us, and we end up taking out this masculinity and strength by like screaming and yelling at the flat screen TV, watching Monday Night Football, or killing people on video games with our friends, rather than slaying the cultural giants of evil and wickedness by advancing the good and what is right, and getting involved with educating our children and loving and serving our wives and crushing it in business, so that we can build the culture we want rather than whining and complaining while we watch Fox News or CNN and see what other people are doing while we sit on the sidelines. Let's not be that guy. I don't want to be that guy. And it took me, 51 years to kind of figure that out. But I want to lean all in.
What are some of those cultural giants that you see as wicked or threats to our existence and well-being?
Well, that's a good question, and we can have a long discussion about this. I don't see politics as an evil giant. I think that politics is a tool that shapes culture. I don't see public education as an evil. I think education is a sacred responsibility that belongs to parents. So when we complain about mandates coming down from heaven, or we complain about what's happening culturally, I say that happened on our watch. When I see big tech or big government or big business, squashing and constricting our freedoms and the things that lead to human flourishing, I say we as men allowed that to happen on our watch. Our fault, not somebody else's fault. They're just running the plays that we should be running, and they're running them better. But when we start running the plays and we're doing it for the honor of God and for the blessing of our families and our neighbors, I believe another player comes onto the field and helps us. And that's the Almighty. And that's called revival. And that's when entire communities and nations and cultures turn around. It's happened throughout history over and over again. It's happened in America. And so it's like that famous quote: the only thing necessary for evil to advance is for good men to do nothing. That's the cultural giant of wickedness: laziness, apathy, complacency, given in to the urges of your flesh and your stomach, and just becoming a blob rather than a beast for the good.
Are these the kind of things that you address in the American Campfire revival? Are these revival. The kind of topics that you address? Or what else are you talking about in those things?
So primarily with the American Campfire Revival, I've been teaching through this book called The American Covenant. And it again goes back to what our forefathers and mothers knew that we have forgotten. We wonder why we're in this mess that we're in today. And we think that politics can save us by electing the right guy. Or we think that overturning a law at the Supreme Court can save us. No, it ultimately can't. The only thing that can save us is what our forefathers and foremothers understood. And that is that nations become free and prosperous when men become free and prosperous in their heart. When John Adams was asked, it may have been Sam Adams, I get the two confused. Sam Adams makes a great beer. John Adams made for a great president. But one of them said, when he was asked about the revolution, he said, which revolution? Which revolution are you talking about? Because there was a revolution that took place long before the War of Independence. It was the revolution that occurred in men's hearts. It was a shift from focusing on self, which leads to suffering and shame and pain and guilt, to a focus on the bigger picture. Stepping back and saying, God made me on purpose, for a purpose. I have a purpose here, and I want to lean into that. And I want to bring more of heaven to earth through the days that God's given me. Once that occurred, they were fighting for something like Luke was fighting to defeat the Death Star. And there was no stopping him, right? And the force was with him. And I believe that the powers of heaven are behind good men of faith and character who are not focused on pleasing themselves, but honoring God and becoming a conduit of what is good and right and true here on earth.
Well said, man. Well said. It inspires me. How do we learn more about your projects, including LifeMark, the American Campfire Revival, everything that you have going on? How do we learn more about this stuff?
Well, thank you for asking. You could just go to kirkcameron.com. I got everything listed there. So just kind of search around and you can find all kinds of cool things. That American Covenant book is just a treasure chest of principles. There's so many
I wrote
stories.
it down. I'm going to get it right after this is done. I want to check that out.
And it's not just the principles that made this a great nation. It's stories of the men who embodied those principles and what they did against all odds when all hope seemed lost. They were part of that irate, tireless minority who were committed to do the right thing over the long haul, believing that God would use it to bring about flourishing for them and for their nations.
Well, we're going to sync everything up so the guys know where to go. I've been following you for a long time. I love your social media profiles because I follow along there, all your projects. Man, what an honor and a treat to be able to talk with you. I really appreciate you sharing some time with me. And great beard. Great beard.
Yeah. Oh, Ryan, thanks for encouraging me so much. And I appreciate what you're doing. And, if all of us just ask that question, God, what do you want me to do? I'm not Ryan, and I don't have his beard. I don't have his podcast or his platform, but I've got some kids, or I've got a job, or I've got some time. Man, I love to pray. Man, I care about people. God, maybe I've got some extra money. What do you want me to do? If we all do that, the gates of hell will not prevail against us.
Agreed. Thanks again, brother. I appreciate you.
All right. You too, Ryan. Take care.